Okay, so tonight is about your dreams, realizing your dreams, and not giving up on them. There's a famous quote by Helen Keller. She said, "We can do anything we want as long as we stick it out long enough." So let's think big, let your imagination go, and think of those dreams that you have that you really, really want to achieve. Perseverance means sticking to something, hanging on and not giving up. So tonight, God willing, I'll share some tools of perseverance that have helped me. And I hope that these will then help you with your own journey, with your own personal dreams. So right now, pick a dream, something that you really, really want to do. It could be a spiritual dream. It could be a talent you want to develop. It could be a skill you wish you could have. It could be something you really want to do. And think about what it is. And then we're going to go through some tools that could help you to achieve it. So everybody's got their dream? Yeah? Okay. So one tool is positive thinking. And under that is the category of visualization. And what that means is like actually using your imagination to picture yourself doing this thing that you want to do. And there was a famous psychiatrist who lived during the Holocaust named Viktor Frankl. You may have heard of him. He wrote a book called Man's Search for Meaning, which is an amazing book. And he speaks about how during the darkest times when he was in Auschwitz, he would visualize. He kept visualizing reuniting with his wife. And every time he just kept thinking about it, picturing it. And then at the end of the war, he actually did get back together with his wife. There's a famous rabbi called the Alter of Kelm, Rabbi Simcha Zissel Ziv. And he said all great men and holy ancestors throughout the generations reached their high spiritual level through imagination, which is very interesting. So just for a minute, you've got your dream idea. If you don't mind, you don't have to do this if you don't want to, but you could close your eyes for a moment and imagine yourself achieving your dream. Try to visualize it in your mind, step by step, and in as much detail as you can. Okay, so this is one tool that you can use to help you to achieve your dream. Also verbalizing, saying to yourself, or you could say it out loud if you want, with Hashem's help, this is going to happen, whatever it is. Hashem is helping me to get this job. Hashem is helping me to do well in this interview. Hashem is helping me to do well to write this poem, to do whatever it is that you want to do. And this will reinforce your emunah when you visualize and you verbalize. We all know that Hashem can give us anything. Of course, we have to do our hishtadlus, our effort. And there's a line in Tehillim that says, open your mouths and I will fill it. And the idea is that Hashem has these storehouses of gifts that he wants to shower us with. But we have to ask for them, ask for what we want, and not settle for a situation if we want it to be better. There's a story about a woman who was expecting a baby, and she was told by the doctor that the baby was going to be disabled. So she was praying and trying to, gear herself up, and she went to a rabbi and asked for a bracha that she'd be able to deal with the situation, and he said, this is wrong. You have to pray for a healthy baby and visualize a healthy baby. So she did that for, I guess, the last few months of her pregnancy, and she, in fact, did have a healthy baby. So there is something about visualizing and knowing what to pray for. Sarah Yosef, who was the daughter-in-law of Raja Yosef, she wrote a book called It's All in Your Mind. And she teaches a positive thinking class. She lives in Israel. And she says that thoughts are really powerful. Thoughts can, if you have negative thoughts and you start thinking of all the negative things, it can affect what happens. And the same, on the other side, when we have positive thoughts and think of the positive outcomes, that can affect what happens as well. And it's a wonderful book. I recommend it. And it's called It's All in Your Mind is the name of the book. And she has many, many examples in that book of people that visualized and things worked out. And I'll just share one story. There was a woman who was 28, And she really wanted to get married. She still hadn't gotten married. She lived in Israel, but she wanted to marry a full-time learner. And that's something that was a little bit hard at that point, at that age, for her to be able to do that. And she took Rebbetzin Yosef's positive thinking course. And the Rebbetzin met with her and spoke to her, and it turned out that this girl had gone out with over 100 people, like 100 guys. And the Rebbetzin said, okay, now sit down and write exactly what you want, what you're looking for. So she wrote down a full-time learner and, all this. And then, and she said, and stop focusing on what went wrong, on all the problems from the past. And just focus on what you want, what you're looking for. And visualize it. So this girl did this over a period of time. She kept visualizing this full-time learner that she wanted to marry. And eventually, a few months later, she came back to the Rebbetzin and she said, I'm engaged. She was engaged to a boy who was 24, who was a full-time learner, and she got married. So, and there's many, many stories that she has like that are just like amazing. Okay. Now, another tool and perseverance tool is dealing with failure and obstacles. Because we have to understand that really sometimes the failures and the problems are going to be building blocks to help us reach our dream. There's a saying from Chazal that a tzaddik falls 7 times, and that feeling and that failure is part of his growth as a tzaddik. So that's an important idea for us to think about, and I'm going to share later my experience with a lot of failures and how they helped me to succeed. There's a famous psychologist named Masha Linehan. I don't know if you've heard of her. She invented a therapy called DBT, dialectical behavior therapy, which actually she developed it for herself, and it helps many people. And she has a quote, most successful people do not have fewer obstacles. They just get up after falling down more often than unsuccessful people do. So I love that quote. And I think if you think about successful people, if you've read memoirs or stories, you'll see that they went through many challenges. Not every president, but a lot of presidents, if you read about them, lost many elections before they actually became president. I know there's stories about President Lincoln. He didn't win right away. There's also, if you think about, there's many authors, if you read about authors, like, I'll tell you a few stories. Madeline L. Engel, I don't know if anybody's ever read her books, A Wrinkle in Time. Does that sound familiar? Okay, so Madeline L. Engel, she has a memoir that she wrote about her writing life. And in the memoir, she talks about how she kept trying to get her first book published. It was called Meet the Austins. And she sent it to so many publishers, and she kept getting rejections. So she at that time, she was using a typewriter. I don't know if anyone still remembers typewriters, but she threw a cover over the typewriter. She said, that's it, I'm not writing anymore. And she started pacing around her house, and then she started thinking of a piece about rejection. So she took the cover off her typewriter and started writing. And then she just continued writing, and eventually she started sending out her books, and Meet the Austins got published, and then of course she wrote books that, A Wrinkle in Time, which got a Newbery Award. So, and of course we all know Dr. Seuss, right? Everybody knows. So I don't know if you know about him. So he had, his first book was called Mulberry Street, Down Mulberry Street, you know that? Anyway, so he sent that out to about 27 publishers, I think, and it was rejected. So after 27 rejections, he threw it in the garbage. Now here's where good wives come in, because his wife was the one that took it out of the garbage and sent it to another publisher, and it got published, and the rest is history. So sometimes you need a good spouse or friend to help you get over the failure. Okay. So, of course, we know this idea from Judaism because we have the idea of tshuva, that if we make a mistake or we fall, we can always come back to Hashem. And we have we have Rosh Hashanah, where we can start all over again every year, which is an amazing gift. So I'm actually going to share my story, my own personal story of a dream and how, with Hashem's help, I did my hishtadlus, my effort and perseverance of some of these tools I'm talking about, and was able to reach my goal. Now, I know that not everybody wants to be a writer or aspires to write a book, though I'm sure there's a lot of us out there. I always used to think everybody was writing a book, but I found out that wasn't true. You don't have to, but anybody here like to write by any chance? Okay, yay. See, there's a few of us out there. Okay. Well, so even if you're not particularly interested in writing, I hope that the lessons that I learned will help you with your own dream. Because, and if your dream is writing, maybe some of the specifics can help you too. So my own dream since I was a little girl was to be a published author. I wanted to have a book written by me. I remember, I always loved reading, and I remember going to the library, getting those books, and looking at who the writers were and thinking, who are these people? I want to do that too. I just remember that feeling. And I was always making up stories. I grew up in Pennsylvania, in a suburb of Philadelphia, whatever. So I remember going outside my house and bouncing a ball and making up stories. I'm sure a lot of people have done that. And then I do remember my father gave me a notebook, a special gray notebook to write stories and poems in. And I don't know if you remember this. I remember the first poem I wrote. Does anybody here remember the first time they wrote a poem or a story? Yeah. So I remember I got this assignment to use spelling words. And I still remember the poem. It was, I have a little echo, and when I say a word, my echo can be followed and always can be heard. And it was so exciting. I was a fourth grader, and I was able to rhyme. It was this big deal to me. And I guess just for me, writing's always been this great outlet and gift, which I always love to share with other people because I think it's such a special blessing. Anyway, it was a very, very, very long journey to get my first book published. And it was a very, very long journey to get my first novel published. Actually, it was a very long journey to get all these books published. So it wasn't like it just happened for me. When I first started writing, it was before there were emails, I guess, and I used to send books away in a brown envelope. You'd send it with postage for return postage. And I would get the book back with a rejection letter. And the rejection letter would say, thank you so much, but we can't, unfortunately, when you get to that unfortunately part, you don't want to read the rest, we can't use it. So I still have this big folder full of all these rejection letters. I'm not sure why I saved them, but I still have it. And I used to have this cartoon on the wall of, it looks like this. You see there's Snoopy with his ears up in the air? He's in rejection slip shock. So we always have this joke in my house that when I get a rejection, that my ears are up. My husband always says, your ears are up. And yeah, just recently I got an email rejection, so my ears were up. Actually, writing, or really, I guess, any dream that you want to do, it requires rewriting. It's not like you just send it away and it's finished. You have to keep working on it and fixing it up. And I always say that a writer, but really anybody who has a dream, you have to think of yourself like the little engine that could. Does everybody know that story? It's one of my favorites. So in that story, you have all these toys that are trying to get over the other side of the mountain, and their train broke down, and they're waiting and trying to get a ride with somebody. And the first couple trains come by, they're not interested in helping. A train comes by, this rickety old train, and says, I'm sorry, but I cannot, and it rumbles away. And then this cute little blue engine comes by, and she said, I've never been to the other side of the mountain, but she sees that they really need help. So she says, I think I can. Does that sound familiar? And that just saying that, I think I can, and then she actually takes them over the mountain. And I think that's such a powerful lesson for all of us, that we have to say to ourselves, whatever our dream is, I think I can do it. And just keep thinking yourself like you're the little blue engine. You have to push away negative thoughts. And Rebbe Sin Yosef has this beautiful, I love this, she talks about how when you start getting a negative thought, immediately say to yourself, this thought is null and void. It's not my thought. And then you have to replace it with a positive thought, because you can't just leave a vacuum. So I find that's very helpful, because of course sometimes negative thoughts pop in. That's part of being human. But we can try to push them away and try to keep positive. So I'll just share the story of my first book first. It's called, well, here it is. Memorable Characters, Magnificent Stories. So it's published by Scholastic, but I'll tell you what happens with this book. So first of all, I had written this kind of big, fat book about teaching writing with like samples of kids writing and all different writing lessons. And I sent it away to this like very prestigious kind of like academic publisher. I won't say who they were. And eventually they sent back 3 evaluations of the book. So the first 2 were like these 2 letters. They were very nice, very complimentary. And the 3rd letter said, "Dear Mrs. Garber, you should stop wasting trees." That was the first sentence.
Wasting trees.
Mm-hmm. "And your writing is not as good as my graduate students." That's actually what the person wrote in the letter. Then the publisher's letter after that said, "Well, because of the 3rd evaluation, we're sorry we can't consider your book." Okay, so my ears were definitely up after that. Now, I guess I could have given up, but I was really determined. So I said, okay, and I sent it to Scholastic. Now, the coolest thing was that I got a call from the editor at Scholastic. Her name was Wendy. And I still remember she called me and she said, "I'd love for you to come to our office and discuss your book." So I was all excited. I was like, this is like the greatest thing. And at that time, I was pregnant with my youngest daughter, who's now 16. But anyway, so I was out to here. And I was so excited. I went to Manhattan and I went to meet with this editor, you know. And it was very interesting because when we met, she said, "I used to be the editor at Instructor magazine." That's like a magazine for teachers. And I remembered that you wrote an article about how to teach kids to create characters, and I liked that article. Now that article, of course, was rejected, but that's how I just saw, like, wow, you know, rejection could even help you. So she said, so now there's one chapter in this book. She pointed to that big fat book I had sent in about characters. So I'd like you to write a whole book about creating characters. And I was like, oh my goodness, I have to rewrite the whole book. I didn't say that. I said, oh yes, of course. And that school year, I was working as a writing mentor in Beis Yaakov, Queens, which, Baruch Hashem, I still do. And so in every classroom that I went into, I did character lessons. And the book really, it's what's special about this book, is that all these pictures in the book are kids from Beis Yaakov, Queens. And when the editor would call me up and she'd say, now, how do you pronounce this name? Like Sprincy and Rivka, do you sure you want to keep those names? Rivka, I said, yes, we want to keep those names. And then she would say, well, could we put some references here? Like she would try to put in references to movies. And I'd say, no, please let's not put that in. And she wanted to put some pictures of boys. I said, well, we don't have any boys in the school. So she was really very respectful and very sweet. And it was just like so special, you know. And then here it was, my first book. So that was very exciting. And I had a feeling like I wanted to send it to that person that had talked about wasting trees. But I had gotten rid of that letter, so that was the end of that. Okay. So let me just go on and tell you the story of my first novel, which is Denver Dreams. And that story also was built on a lot of rejection. So here we go. What I just wanted to mention that I had to do a lot of work to get that novel finished and done. But I know that the real reason I got the merit to get it published was that I did a lot of davening, and I also decided, since I'm working with words, that I should work on Shmiras Halashon, which is being careful with what you say. You know, careful that you don't gossip and say bad things about people. And so we actually, in my house, we learn every Shabbos, we learn a Sefer Chafetz Chaim, in the text. And I feel like that really helped me have a merit to get published. So the story of my novel was that I had a very close friend when I went to Stern College. And she grew up from a very different background than me. I didn't grow up observant at all. And she grew up in a religious home. And she was just such an amazing person. She was a good listener, she was a good friend, and she was a very non-judgmental kind of person. So you'll notice that in the character in my book, Denver Dreams, is based on her. Her name is Chaya, and she's a lot like my friend. Anyway, we stayed close friends after college, and she used to come to our house every Rosh Hashanah. But unfortunately, she passed away at a very young age. And that was very difficult. And I couldn't write about it. Like usually, like writing has always been this outlet for anything, but I remember I just couldn't write about it. It was too hard. And then after some time passed, I sat down one day, I said, you know what, maybe it'll make me feel better. I decided to write about our friendship. So I wrote a 10-chapter memoir of how we met and our friendship. And it ended up being about 90 pages, which is kind of short for a book. And I showed it to my mother. It's always nice to show your writing to your mother. And my mother said, oh, it's beautiful, she liked it. So I decided I would send it to a publisher. At that time, there was a publisher called Targum. I don't think they're around anymore. And the editor at that time was Miriam Zakin. She's now the editor at Art School. But she was the editor of Horizons magazine. It was like a magazine where women could send in poetry and stories and memoirs. And she had published some of my articles. So I figured, okay, she knows my writing, I'll send it to her. So she sent back a really nice rejection letter. My ears were up, but it was really nice. She said, the writing's beautiful, but this book is too short and not marketable. Okay, fine, I tucked it away, that was that. Anyway, a short time later, I remember my mother asking me, well, whatever happened to that story, that you wrote about your friends? And something clicked. I started thinking about that rejection letter, because you can learn from rejection, and about it being too short. I said, you know what? I'll make it into a novel. And then I can make up stuff, add it in. It'll be longer, That was fun. So in order to do that, I started reading some books on, fiction writing. And these are two books that really helped me. So anyone that's interested in fiction writing, I recommend these. What's Your Story? Helps you with plot. It's wonderful. It's actually written for teenagers, but it's a very, gives you how to plot a story, and it's wonderful. And The Art of Compelling Fiction, so that author, I felt like he was my teacher. I read that book so many times. And he says you should give your main character a secret and reveal it slowly through the story. So that was a great idea. So I did that. I gave my main character, Lily, she had a secret, and I gave Chaya, the other character, a secret. So they both had secrets. I'm not going to tell you what they are, because hopefully you'll read the book. Anyway, and then I also wanted to keep that theme of friendship, which I did. And then I needed a villain, because you kind of have to have, an antagonist. So I thought of this, I just pictured this really mean girl. I don't know, it came into my head. And I pictured her with long, dark hair and these hurricane green eyes. And I wanted to give her a name that sounded mean. And I just thought of this name, Rhea Clark, so that was her. And she was in the story. Now, sometimes when you have a dream, whatever it is, you need some guidance or encouragement from a good friend, spouse, somebody that can give you help without discouraging you, which is a little tricky line, and you have to kind of know yourself who that person is. So I had this friend that I felt like, I'm going to show it to her. I knew she liked to write, and I knew she was kind of an encouraging kind of person. So I gave her my story. She was willing to read it. And what she said to me was, it could just be me that I'm not really into teenage things. It got very interesting around chapter 13. And I'm like, chapter 13? There is no editor that's going to read through your book till chapter 13. Forget it. If you want to get published, they'd have to start out at the first sentence, the first paragraph. So it was very painful, but it was very helpful. So I went back, and I put a conflict right away in the beginning. And I have to thank her for that. There's actually a scene in the book where the protagonist, the main character whose name is Lily, she sends her manuscript, she's a writer, she sends her manuscript back, this manuscript out, and it comes back to her, and she's very upset. And Chaya comforts her. And that scene was actually something that really happened to me, because my friend was in my house, and I got back a manuscript that I had really put my heart in, some book, I don't even remember which book it was. And I remember I was just crying, I was so upset. And I remember she said something to me, I'll always remember. She said, your writing is good. You'll see one day it will get published. Don't be discouraged. And I always remember that. And so like I said, it's good to have a good friend that can encourage you. So when my book was done, that's the first novel, Denver Dreams, it was up to its 9th rewrite. So I actually had on my computer 9 different versions of the book. And it wasn't called Denver Dreams, it was called Connecting, because I felt like it was about all different connections. And then I gave it to my daughter, Rivka, who happens to be an amazing editor. I just have this blessing that my daughter is such a good editor. So I always ask her for help and suggestions. She's great. So anyway, she helped me out a lot. And then I sent it off to a publisher, and I waited breathlessly for their reply. I emailed it. And a little while later, I guess it was about a month, I got an email back, and I remember this, it said, "We enjoyed your book, it was a good read." And that was the end of the email. And I'm like, okay, so aren't you going to publish it? Like, hello? No. Anyway, so then I sent it to another publisher, and that publisher emailed back after like a day, "We'll pass on this." Ouch. So my ears were up a lot. Okay, so then I mailed it to another publisher because, like I said, you just can't give up. You have to persevere. And this was like a big publisher, and I thought, okay, this big publisher, they're going to publish it. And actually, it was very nice. They sent back a whole like list of suggestions, and you don't always get that. So I was very grateful. They had a list of 10 suggestions. One of the suggestions was take this story out of New York, put it in a different setting. And so I remember thinking, well, I had gone on a vacation with my husband to Denver, and it was beautiful. So I put my book in Denver. What's funny is later on I found out that there actually is a seminary in Denver. I just made it all up. And the people are like, oh, yes, of course, blah, 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 seminary. I'm like, oh, okay. Anyway, so I did all their suggestions, and I sent it back to them. And then I waited, and I waited, and I got an email back, and they said it's better, but it needs proofreading, and it needs more work. Okay. So then I had this other friend that was a copy editor. I asked her to look at it. She did. She was very kind. She looked at it. Okay, then I said, okay, this is it. It's ready. I emailed it back, and then I was waiting, but I was like, you know when you're kind of scared, like I was scared to open up when they sent me back the email because I was scared what they would say. So when the email came back, I asked my kids if they would open it, and they said no. I asked my husband, he said no. So I had to open it, and there it was, and it said, you know, it's much better, but we still can't publish it. And I was like, my ears were sticking way up in the air. And it's like, oh my goodness. And I remember thinking, okay, this is it, forget it. I was feeling really discouraged. But then I said, okay, I've got to get this book published. So I don't remember now if I emailed them back or I called them, and I asked, is there another publisher you would recommend? And they were very nice. The editor there said, yes, why don't you try Jerusalem Publications? They're a small publisher in Israel. Try them. So I didn't have the information, so I got the information from the email, and I emailed it to them. And then, a few days later, I got an email back. I'd like to talk to you about your book. Would you prefer a phone call or an email? So I figured, okay, they're going to probably give me more suggestions how to fix it. A phone call is better than an email, so a phone call. And then, you know how when something really amazing happens, you just remember exactly where you were and what you were doing? So I remember, I live in Kew Garden Hills. So I remember I was driving to Amazing Savings, and my youngest daughter, Zena Leah, was in the back seat. And all of a sudden, my phone rang, so I pulled over to the side, and I answered the phone. And this lovely voice on the other end said, hello, this is Aviva Rappaport from Jerusalem Publications. We love your book. We'd like to publish it. I was in total shock. I said, really? She said, yes. So that was very exciting, yes. So Baruch Hashem, that was my first novel. It was fun when they sent the cover and the back cover. It was so exciting. Anyway, so this is the publisher. I got to meet her. She lives in Geula. So I got to meet her, and there she is. And then this was really thrilling. I don't know if they still had, there was this bookstore in the old city right by the Kosel. So my husband and I went in there, and there was my book on the shelf. I said, okay, we got to take a picture. So there I am holding my book. So that was really awesome. And what's interesting is people asked me for a sequel. And I was trying to figure out how I could write a sequel, because in my book, I take this Lily from being a young girl going to seminary to being a married lady with a daughter in Shidduchim. So I'm like, how am I going to write a sequel to this? But then I said, you know what, I'll take the youngest daughter and have her going to seminary. But I had a little problem. I'll tell you what the problem was. The youngest daughter's name was Abigail, which is my second to youngest daughter's name. And when she heard that I was writing a sequel starring Abigail, she said, I don't want to have my name in the book because you're going to give her problems and everyone's going to think it's me. And I mean, I can understand. It was not so comfortable. So my daughter Rivka, the one I told you is a good editor, she said, well, you know, Ima, some people, they go by their middle name. So we gave Abigail a middle name. We named her Abigail Tehila. And so she's only called Abigail on the first page, and the rest of the book she's Tehila. So we got rid of that problem. Okay. And then, the last book that I wrote is, the most recent one was Road Less. It's called The Road Less Traveled, and it got published by that company that sent me all the suggestions. But that's also a cool story, because what happened was I ran a Jewish Women's Writers Conference 2 summers ago. I decided I wanted to do that, and I had asked Rabbi Krohn to speak, and another author. I forgot her name. She's like an author. She writes a lot of historical fiction serials for Bina. Well, anyway, she was there. And so I really needed to have ladies coming to pay for the speakers. And I wanted to have the publishers. So what happened was I was taking the positive thinking class. So I was visualizing. And I said, okay, 60 women are going to show up at this class. I just kept visualizing, and then I called the publishers, these different publishers, and I said, I'm going to have a lot of people, probably 60 women, and then I told the women that were interested, we're going to have 7 publishers, and I had almost 60 women signed up. They didn't all come, but I almost had 60, and all those publishers came, and I got to meet this publisher from Feldheim, and I asked him, would you be interested in this? It was a serial I had written for Mishpacha, teen pages, and he said, oh, my daughter reads that, maybe, and then he said, yes. So that's how that got published, which was amazing. And there's Rabbi Krohn speaking. And it was very cool because he spoke about his own writing process, how his mother used to help him with his essays when he was in 6th grade, and he recommends that. And he told all about his own writing. And then that's how I felt after that. Okay. So I just want to review again some of those perseverance tools that we talked about, and give you a chance to think about your dreams. So we talked about, of course, davening and doing something spiritual that'll help us, to give us a merit. It's always good to ask Hashem to partner with you, whatever you do every day. And so it's with your dream, of course, asking Him to help you. Visualizing, we talked about visualizing. Remember how Viktor Frankl, how he kept visualizing reuniting with his wife, and then he did after the war. And visualizing is thoughts are powerful, visualizing is positive thinking is powerful. We talked about pushing away negative thoughts and saying this thought is null and void, and replacing it with a positive thought. We talked about building on failure and obstacles, because a lot of, here, Instructor Magazine had rejected my article that led to my book. Or, and we talked about so many people that had failures and obstacles, and that helped them to grow and to get accomplished what they wanted to accomplish. We talked about verbalizing to yourself, with Hashem's help, I'm going to get this job. With Hashem's help, I'm going to get my shidduch. With Hashem's help, I'm going to make this beautiful meal, whatever it is that you want to accomplish. And we talked about being like the little engine that could. I think I can. Okay, so think a minute about your dream that we talked about in the beginning, whatever your dream is, and practical ways that you can work on it and accomplish it. And I'm visualizing that your dreams will come true, and that you should email me and let me know, because I know that it will. Okay, so anyway, I want to give everybody a bracha here, that whatever your dreams are, and your dream, that you should have it should come true. And I want to thank everybody for coming.